bullish upon it and really want to get it done, it happens. Another example I will take from healthcare because, and that's where I was very personally involved because when you go to a hospital, when you go to Dr. A, the treatment plan is different. When you go to Dr. B, the treatment plan is very different. How to make sure that you have a uniform treatment plan whether you go to Dr. A, B, or C, or D. And in India, we all know that it's very physician driven. When you go to healthcare, it's very physician driven. In US, it's very hospital driven. You go to a hospital and then you are, sure that this is the quality of care that you will get. So I worked with 2 or 3 Indian hospitals to make sure that we can move from physician-driven healthcare delivery to hospital-driven healthcare delivery. So these are 2 partnership I can share.
Thank you very much, Ashir. Just for everybody else, I'm going to just ask a couple of questions, leave some time for all of you, but later as well in the day or in the next 2 days, if you have any questions and you want to engage with the lovely panel or anybody else, just scan your QR code, obviously with permission. Please don't do it slyly. And you will get their contact information. So their names and the email addresses, and you can reach out to them. All right, so we've spoken about the need of partnerships, meaning for partnerships, having those partnerships, and there's agreement that we must have partnerships. That's the essence what we've got. And Vic, thank you for agreeing and just saying that, yeah, it's one of those events that we'd like to do and we'd engage and we'll network. I wouldn't say a lot of times, but a few times we've noticed that right on the top where you're sat and some of the other leaders, there is that agreement and saying that there is partnership. But we'd also be keen to know what happens beyond, because every person who wants to enter, with all due respect, or whether it's a faculty member or a research associate or student or anybody or a head of a department, will not always have access right at the top. They're going to do a peer-to-peer conversation. So I'd love to know from you, beyond the top leadership, how can partnerships be sustained? So what, in your experience working in the sector, is the dissection of how others would engage in, because there is a commitment and it's important for them to be practical as well. The efficiency and the effectiveness is equally important.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really great question. And I think if I kind of break it down, and I know we're touching on partnerships across multiple sectors, across different realms of education as well. But if I look at partnership at a government-to-government level, for example, we've got, our states and territories are present over here in India as well. We're quite lucky to have a very robust ecosystem where we've got Austrade at the federal level, and then we've got Study Melbourne, Study Adelaide, Study Perth, all these different study destinations that are represented as well. And it's the same for a lot of the destinations out there for the US and for the UK. We convene a group called the Study Australia Partnership, which is to ensure that, we're all working together. So that starts with that mandate at the very top to say, hey, what's the big problem over here? We're not here to kind of say, promote Sydney or promote Melbourne. We're here to promote Australia. So I think that's the mandate. That's how we do it. Even over here today, you'll find colleagues from Western Australia that are at the Study Australia Pavilion. So for us, it's about kind of, taking that direction and really elevating the one thing that we need to do, which is our brand, Australia. When we look at the partnership space, and if we say, I guess, taking that policy and how do we actually react to it? Now, most of you would have seen the news yesterday morning. So Australia is going through a few changes. We're really looking to see how we can, make sure that we maintain the integrity of our international education system. We have been leaders in this for a very long time, along with a lot of you, and we want to make sure that we are growing sustainably. But more important, I think everyone's mentioned this at some stage or the other, it's all about the student. So it's about making sure that the student has a good experience. I am a product of that international education system, and I think it's the best decision I ever made, and we want to make sure that students will continue to have that experience no matter what destination they go to. Now, the reason I mentioned that is that's a bit of policy, but what that does, it almost kind of mandates partnerships, because to grow sustainably, again, that's the policy at the very top, is to say, look, we need a sustainable growth pattern for the sector. In reality, what that means is partnerships and agreements and so forth becomes even more important, because if we talk about rankings, Australia is disproportionately represented in the rankings. We've got 41 universities. How many universities do you have in the US, Shishir?
46.
Yeah.
About 4,000.
Yeah. So,
It's not fair. I hear you.
but we do exceptionally well. We've got 3 of our universities in the top 20, majority of them in the top 100 or the top 200. So we are disproportionately represented. So for us, it's really important that we are then going out, and I think you mentioned that if there's a particular area that a university says, look, this is where I'm weak, and India is a perfect hotbed for that. ISC, IIMs, amazing. The amount of talent that sits in India and the amount of capability that sits in India. So for us, it's a no-brainer. That's how we, the mandate is to grow sustainably. Well, that's what we're doing. We're building those sustainable partnerships that will actually deliver for the future.
Sure. So what I wanted to add to that is, in a partnership, and I'm talking largely about universities, but even could be schools, I think there need to be 2 or 3 different people involved in the partnership. It's not just the leadership. It has to be someone in the faculty, in the teaching space, or even a student who has to be interested in that partnership in a deeper way. I think the policy, the people who lead the partnership ideas, these are people who set up the air cover for you. They create the agreement is to say, okay, we will partner. But then somebody needs to put their hand up and say, okay, we are going to own this partnership. And you need these owners at a different level than the leadership. The leadership is probably, looking at a multiple objectives. And, within that, if there's a person within the organization who says, I want to own this partnership up and really, take it towards a certain purpose, it can happen. And a lot of times, when we talk about universities and partnership, universities usually are partnering with universities or they're partnering with governments. Rarely are universities partnering with schools. I think this is a new space that can be opened. I know a lot of schools in India who actually travel to universities abroad, but they're often looking at, how these universities will be for our students. And they're always looking for maybe, just to find out more about the universities, but they're not looking at how schools can actually partner with universities. That's another space that can be looked at, because schools have a local, a local footprint, and maybe they can help a university who wants to come and do research or wants to come and do some field work. They can actually help them. So I think it needs to happen at 2-3 levels. Otherwise, it doesn't sustain usually.
So I'd like to pull us back to about 10,000 feet above. It's not about the students. It's not about the research. It's not about the institutions. It is about the opportunity to find talent. And so given the fact, and I think most people would agree, the U.S. has been through some tumultuous political times recently. We have an election coming up in November, so many of us are very nervous about that election. We want to make sure as educators that we are finding the most talented researchers, the most talented students. And so, we talk about where will the solution come for the world's biggest problems. And we think the solution will come from someone maybe that we haven't found yet or someone that we haven't discovered. And so building these partnerships allows us to spread out more. We talked about research, allows us to spread out more with students. It also helps us to spread out more with faculty. So we have a high number, our Dean of Business, he grew up in Delhi. He was giving me things that I must see before I was coming. And so the more we can have those levels of exchange and also what I would just consider, a permanent exchange. So there's a huge amount of talent all over the world. I think that India is poised to have more of that talent given population and the value as a society that is placed on education here. And that makes it very attractive for us to go and find the next Nobel Prize winner or, the next math award, because we know that that student may be out there. And the only way that we can reach the broadest number of students is through partnership. And so that's why it makes the most sense for us to strike up these partnerships, nurture these partnerships, and make sure that they expand. And one thing that I would just caution, 4,000 institutions sounds like a lot of institutions in the U.S. We are seeing a retraction of that because we had seen a large birth rate growth. Now we're seeing that retraction come back. A lot of those are community colleges because we also are very committed to students entering the educational system at the place that makes the most sense for them. And I think one of the things we struggle with when we are out internationally is people have 50 U.S. institutions in their head. And so looking at individual programs, the accreditation carried by those individual programs will allow opportunities for students, faculty members, pathways to explore institutions that may not have been one of the highly rejected institutions in the U.S. And so that's always when we're focused on program to program, that's what we're looking to do is expand those students coming into those very successful programs that we know will lead to opportunities for them to have wonderful careers and lives.
Thank you, Dawn, and thank you, Bert, for adding to that perspective. It's amazing to see how you look, and what is the vision that you have of that 4,000, saying it's a smaller number. But I couldn't agree with you when you speak about the 50 institutions, because I think we have the similar thing in India. Everyone knows about the institutions of eminence, the IITs, IIMs, and even today we've only touched on those. Of course, we've got Bath, so we're speaking about Ahmedabad University, and it's a highly ranked one. But it just comes very naturally. And it's not with any disrespect, but it's just easier to give such examples. But there is so much talent in every other part.
And so, we all complain about the rankings, but we all cite them. I mean, the fact that we're a top 100 institution, we don't fail to say that when we're out and about.
Yeah, every Indian institution I spoke with in the last 45 days were just so at it to get their rankings and their NIRF, and they said for everything we do, every event, we need to put it down. So I hear you that as much as we say that we're away from them, they're equally important, and that decision-making time when students are looking at what institution, this does come in some way, shape, or form, whether it's for teaching excellence, whether it's for research, whether it's for any of those things. But I won't go on that path right now. I don't think that's appropriate. We also spoke about the population in India and the number of students who need to go abroad, and because that's also a push mechanism. A few years back, there was a pull mechanism where international universities attracted bright Indian students, but today we don't have those many institutions. So there is also a small number. It's not small, it's about, I think, 11 lakh is what I read last. Students who went for outward mobility, so outside India, but into India we get very few. We get about 47 or 48,000 students. But because you work in the enrollment space, so you obviously interact a lot with schools, but also with higher education who want to come and do a lot of partnership work. I'm sure that at the university, specifically because you're looking at admissions, you lead that practice. There are some strategies that you use for enhancing all the things we love to talk about, and I think we really work towards that. That is access, accessibility, quality, engagement, all of those things. So is there something specific that you run at the institute, or is there any guidance for the audience when Indian institutions are looking at those kind of partnerships? That would be helpful.
I think it's a very difficult question, because I think partnerships are not really, maybe they are, at a broader level you can have conversations, but I think partnerships are really about finding that one meaningful, relationship. And it means, like, when we are doing enrollment, we may have thousands of students who apply to the university, but we screen through them. We take a lot of time to understand each profile, and we try to say, okay, who will fit here in the university. I think partnerships are exactly like that. You have to work very hard. It takes very long, and I think it's easier to say, okay, let's sign an agreement, but it's very difficult to say, okay, let's do 10 visits, talk to people, understand each other, take the time to figure out what you want to partner in, and build it slowly. For example, he spoke about Professor Sood. When I was working at USC a few years back before Shishir, that's when this conversation began, saying that, Professor Sood was, I had some conversations with him, and he was doing work on economics, and he wanted to look at partnerships in India, and we talked to a few people. So it didn't work out at that point of time, but it's the sustaining of some of these things that makes it work. And I think a lot of times when in India or even other countries, I think the idea is that we're running after these rankings, and therefore the idea is how quickly can we do partnerships, how many can we show that we have. And I think that instead of that route, if we can keep those rankings aside for a while and say how do you build a long-term relationship, something like ISC and USC has done. It's a partnership that's been there for the last 15 years. So can you really build a long-term partnership and not focus so much on the rankings or what you're going to get out of it? Uh, do it for the right reasons and sustain with that partnership, and it will go through phases. So when you do that in the long run, then you can find that meaningful exchange that makes not just a good partnership, but then your students will find meaning in it, your faculty will find meaning in it, your leadership will find meaning in it, and that then can add to your rankings as well.
I would give you the analogy of a marriage. So the proposal and the wedding. If you're only focused on the proposal and the wedding, it's not going to be a good marriage. If you are focused on the long-term health of both parties in the partnership and you both are willing to work at it, it'll be a wonderful marriage. But that really helps shape what you're trying to do so that it's mutually beneficial for both. Yeah, sure.
And I want to add to that marriage thing. Also what's important is don't go searching after everyone.
Yes, that is good.
Look for the few people you want to have the partnership with, because sometimes we see people are just doing they want 50 partnerships. It doesn't work that way.
It's not a box check.
Don, you know what I'm going to do? I will steal that line now. I'll be using that. I think that's fantastic. Yeah, done. I think when we look at partnerships, I think you touched on this, and Ritika, that question made so much sense. We've got 120,000 students of Indian origin studying in Australia at the moment. Any guesses as to how many students of Australian origin are studying in India? Yeah, not even. I think we are, and I think that's the sustainability aspect, and that's what everyone's been touching on. It has to work for everybody. It has to work for multiple levels, and I think from a government perspective, given the strength of the bilateral relationship, we are investing in scholarships, for example. So we've got the Maitri program. That's to try and get more students from Australia to come and study in India. We've got a handful of students. We've got some really good partnerships where we have regular kind of mobility from Australia to India as well. We've got the New Colombo Plan, which is another sort of scholarship that encourages study in the region. But I think that's probably one of the main things which, hopefully in 5 years' time, if I can stand up and say there's 120,000 students, or by then say 250,000 students studying in Australia and 100,000 students in India, wouldn't that be great?
So I think on your point, bringing students from international location to India, it's becoming a bit challenging because of all the media the things and safety, security, and various other issues. And the other thing that comes with this is destination marketing. When you go talk to the students and tell them what's there in India, what you can get. China has done that brilliantly. Many of the students, they never used to go to China to explore, live there and study there, and India has so much to offer. Beyond the traditional popular themes like yoga, culture. So there's so much of science and the tech sector that's there in India. There's so much opportunity, but again, it takes a lot more effort. And other thing which I like to highlight here is that what it takes to bring one partnership into fruition. Suppose we are going for 1+1. Someone has to do the course mapping. How many credits can be transferred, and when they are going to be there, whether they will be able to apply for OPT or not. One successful partnership takes year of work. So if you are signing 50 partnerships and 60 partnerships or 100 partnerships, do you have manpower to make sure that all of them are seeing the daylight? And so that's something which one has to look into.
Thank you, Shishir. Yeah, sure.
Shishir talked about how many students are coming to India. Exchange programs are a good opportunity to start that process. But I'll give you a very interesting thing. Ahmedabad University now has 6 study abroad partners. And in those 6, we've had about 40, 50 students who've gone abroad, but only one student has come to India. And I was talking to a few universities in the US, and I was asking them, why to people who are running the global programs, saying, why is it that students are not coming to places like India? And they said, oh, they only want to go to Europe. They don't want to come to other countries. Now, this is something that, I've been talking to them saying, why don't you start by the person first coming to India, exploring universities here and actually figuring out, is it worth for a student to come to India? Only if they do that with a commitment will that change over a period of time. And that one student who came, of course, had a great time and he's been writing about it, but it takes a long time for this to start changing. So I think there's a lot more commitment required even by universities abroad to start finding those universities in India where their students could come.
And that just brings me to the point that the panelists were talking about. It's not only important that we're talking about students, but we're also saying students are a part of the partnership. This is a classic example where actually the student is probably leading that partnership, is leading about being the brand ambassador. Now, it wouldn't be fair to end a panel discussion without talking a little bit about credit transfer, because that's one of the few questions I get asked very, very often from schools. And Don, because you're in the enrollment services and you lead that practice, would you tell us a little bit about how you work with the credit transfer system at Drexel or any other, because you work with so many universities?
So I have been at Drexel, I don't know, Josh, 8 months. Yeah, so very short time. And what I have found is we have a lot of curricular complexity. And so we have actually undertaken a new academic transformation process where we are going back and we are moving from a quarter to semester system. And as we do that, we have to revise our curriculum. So therefore, we are going deep dive into all of our courses, all of our opportunities. And so what that has allowed me to do is look at how are we taking the IBs? How are we taking APs? How are we bringing in transfer credit? And so for us, the most successful way to do that with our university partners is we directly map specific courses required for graduation. And so it's actually outlined in our agreement that these courses will come in, and when students have these courses, they will enter into a prescribed program of study. And we do that to be very specific to make sure that students can take advantage of the co-op, because currently students at Drexel can do 3 co-ops in 5 years. And there are 6-month-long paid co-ops with our business partners. And so we have to be really specific about that curriculum. But we are expanding our ability to do that. But the way we do that is we trust the local experts. So, and I find that that is a much more successful way for us to do that. So we will link faculty on our campus with faculty on the campus where we're forming the partnership. We're not imposing what we think on them. They are helping us understand. And I would be very cautious of an institution that comes in and prescribes every single thing, because it means that they haven't done their due diligence to really look at the local ecosystem and what's happening. And one of the things that we talk a lot about is making sure that when students are coming for these pathway programs, that they're not only getting the education they need to be successful beyond, but we want to make sure that they're coming in with as little disruption as possible. And so by having local experts help us map those courses in that curriculum, we're sure that they have the prereqs. And so when we're talking about, an engineering manufacturing degree, or we're talking about, one of our computer science degrees or one of our business degrees, we have a huge program for accounting. It is very important that our accountants are good at math. So we have to make sure that they've had the prerequisites there. But the easiest and most cost-effective way is to have somebody in country and a local expert at the institution.
Thank you. I love the point that you need local experts, because I couldn't agree more with you. I could be talking here for the rest of the day, but I do know that we have an opening to attend. But just before we go, two of the panelists out of four have said I asked difficult questions, but I'm sure you'll ask better questions. I'd like to open it up to the room. If any of you have questions, sure. Just get the mic.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry for being late, although I was very keen to attend this session. We talked about sustainability and the agreements as I was listening to. My issue here with my experience is that generally universities give agreements for 1 or 2 years only. Why not these agreements are perpetual in nature, wherein you can terminate the contract by giving 30 days or maybe 60 days notice? Because in this case, there is always a sword on the apple or apple on the sword. So things get disturbed. That is my submission here.
I don't disagree with that. So we typically start with a 3-year agreement. And the reason we do that is because we are trying to understand and make sure, and that gives us an opportunity to have some students go through the process. And that way then we can go back and we can adjust if we need to make adjustments with curriculum. We don't enter into a 3-year agreement thinking that we're going to terminate at the end of 3. It's really just the front door that you come in. So, but I do appreciate the point.
Add on this, many times, we discussed about agreements that go into a drawer or a cupboard, just to make sure that, we are not thinking about it after a certain time. And many times it's weaned out, those who are actually operational and those who are not operational. Those who are not operational will automatically fall off the radar. And those who are operational, continuity is not a problem. Sustainability is not a problem. As long as people at both the sides are committed, and it's just a paperwork. Sometimes legal departments also raise their hand that there has to be a timeline. For anything. So whether it's a degree, it's a timeline. It's a partnership, it's a timeline. So that's one of the reasons why it works that way.
Thank you very much. That was an insightful panel discussion. I must say I got attracted here by the Red Sea, Blue Ocean strategy, and I was waiting for that to come up. So probably I'm going to ask you a strategic question. So you talked of 2 things which I wanted to touch upon and get your expert views on. One was the, this negative reciprocity circle that exists for ratings, and then students applying to 50 universities, and it's a waste of money and energy, and it just skews the whole cycle. What are your thoughts on that, and how do you break that cycle? And the other one really is about, we talked of partnerships, and strategically, what are the elements that make a good partnership? And what should one look for? I think that will enlighten us on, just sort of a closure for the panel. Thank you.
I'm happy to take the first part and then pass to everyone else. I think that's a great couple of questions. I think really quickly in terms of the student options and choices, it is abundant at the moment. I think, especially for an Indian student is acutely aware of the value that they have to offer to the world in terms of the education option that they choose. We've been talking about the rankings, absolutely. What we haven't touched on is the perception and the change in mindset from students when they are now looking at things like the impact rankings. You mentioned that, and the THE impact rankings, and I'll mention it again because an Australian university is #1 in it. But that's besides the point. But I think it is very true, and I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done at various levels. Why are we here today? We've got Sharath who's videoing me right now. Thanks, Sharath. Sharath leads our school strategy, and for all the schools present, you'll hear from him. So we as government are reaching out to schools so we can give you all the information you need, so you can offer that to your students about what it is like to study in Australia, the options that are available, and the partnerships that are available where you can study in Australian education in India. So I think there's a few things that need to be done. I wish there was, here's 2 points, but it is an ongoing process.
Thank you.
So one thing I would say about rankings is if you put 50 cooks in a room and you ask them to all prepare the same dish, you would have very different takes on that dish. You'd have very different spice levels. You'd have very different. That is what the rankings are. And so that is why all the rankings don't come out and rank everybody the exact same, because there's so many different weights and metrics put onto it. So I think as educators, helping students understand the different flavors of rankings, but again, going back to those individual programs, I think will really make the difference when it comes to dealing and handling with that and getting them to understand there is a whole broader. And really for most institutions, and I think my colleagues would agree as well, it's about the pipelines that start. And so the same in the US, if we all go after the top 1% of students, that leaves 99% of students who could have been very successful at our institution, but never had the chance. And so really starting to have those conversations with very impressionable young students about, it's not just about, how many of you drive a Ferrari in the room? You drive a Ferrari? What? No, but do you own one? Okay, anybody own a Ferrari? Okay, I drive a Subaru that's 11 years old. It gets me where I need to go. It's highly dependable. It does everything I need. And that's what we need students to understand. It's not chasing the elusive and being disappointed when they don't achieve that. It's about going towards something that's going to get them to the next step. And so helping students understand that, I think, will be very important.
Thank you.
I think it has to go with perception also, and it's not only perception of students, but also the family, what to believe, ultimately what you will believe. You will believe a ranking, you believe a program, what's your belief? Many times, nowadays we are even talking about other subject areas, when we were kids, either you're going into medical or engineering or you are useless, so that was the perception that we used to come from, and commerce and arts, oh my God, if you think at that time, 10, 20 years back, people used to think that, sorry, no, no offense meant, but that's how we used to be raised, People used to say, I'm not from Delhi, I am from Lucknow and Uttar Pradesh region, and there, that's how they used to tell me. If I would have gone to my father and asked him to, hey, I want to do a BCom, he would have thrown me out of home, go and fend for yourself. So it's the tradition that we have lived in, and we believe in a ranking. We believe the institution. If you go to certain institution, it will give you good career opportunity. You will be set for life. And Indian parents are looking for options that will set their kids for life. This is the solution. There's no other solution.
Thank
you have
you so
to do
much.
this.
Thank you. I'm very mindful of time, but I just wanted to say perhaps it's the entire ecosystem that needs to change, and IC3 has a big role to play, I think. Thank you.
I'm just going to say something to Shishir because I know he's looking at me. As much as I believe in the red ocean and blue ocean strategy, and I'm a product of someone who's wanted to study at an institution, I wasn't even looking at what I was studying, but for me it was, I have to study in LSR, back in the days, a few decades back. But I think also it's important to understand that skills are transferable. So as much as I would have loved to be an engineer, doctor, lawyer, and posh and all of that, but I didn't follow that career thing. I studied philosophy. I became a stockbroker. I traded for the New York Stock Exchange, then changed and did, worked with Dell Computers building machines. One day I got bored, so I joined the civil aviation to audit aircrafts. So very different things. I can go on and on, but it's not about me, but it's just about, because you touched on blue ocean and red ocean, I wanted to just clarify that, yes, we need to be in the blue ocean. It's no longer like, yes, I know time's up, thank you. Those are our student volunteers. That is how effective they were. If I was the timekeeper, we would have never finished. But I think just on that note, that all of us really need to be in the blue ocean and not limit ourselves to the red ocean where you have those 4 or 5 career options or career choices. I know time's up, but I still would like to say thank you very much for being here. I'm very, very grateful to be sharing stage with such an immense panel. I know I'm going a little more educated, and I'm sure all of you are. Thank you for giving your time. It was an early morning. I wasn't even expecting many people to come, but thank you for being here instead of being at the coffee store. We'll go and grab something to drink, and then we'll meet you at the Grand Ballroom in the opening plenary. Thank you, everyone.
So
So we finished the networking reception downstairs, the networking session, and I think everybody's gone to grab a cup of tea or coffee. The intention of us meeting here in 303, and thank you all for RSVPing and making that effort to look at the form, was for institutions to meet other institutions. Because one thing that we do at IC3 is we talk about counseling in every school, and there is a lot of access and networking to high schools, pan-India and across the globe. But I think you were there in a session in the morning, and I think some other people were there, where you don't get an opportunity to really meet with other universities in India. We have PM Munjal. Thank you so much for coming. So just an opportunity to have a conversation, to continue what we started in the morning, of how sustainable partnerships really help in a student's life. Hence, we're here. The seating is not appropriate, I understand, and I promise this was not by design, but I think the number of sessions that we've been having, it's like this. Sorry, you wanted to say something? You were waving? So I will encourage everyone to engage. We've ordered for some food here, so it's going to come in a while. But please do meet each other, do some introductions. And I'm sure others are going to follow, because I saw everybody going down to the exhibition hall, so that maybe they're a little mixed up over where 303 is. They had to come back here. So I'm going to leave on that note. But anybody who has an idea of how you want to engage, because everybody's looking at their phone right now very, very seriously.
242. So go around, find any two random people and ask. Yeah, like ask anybody, somebody who you don't know, and ask them something which they are very proud of, and just express yourself about what do you do and stuff. And then those two people go and find another two more people, and then you become a group of four. Okay. And then the group of four breaks into two, and again those two people go find two more people.
You've got to start because I haven't understood a word.
Okay, 242, 242.
It'd be nice to just have some introductions from different parts.
Yeah, that would be nice.
We'll start with that. Akhil, stay on and introduce yourself.
Sorry, I'm Akhil Bagga, and I'm the regional manager of South Asia and Europe for Royal Holloway University of London. Used to be based in Delhi, but now I'm based in London. So it's been about 3 years that I've been in the UK. And in fact, I very, very fortunately, when Ritika just mentioned about BML Munjal, I was working for a previous university before, and the academic knew Mr. Vishal really well. So I've spoken to him, and I've been to your university. So the moment she said BML Munjal, I'm like, why, you're renting? So yeah, so really nice meeting all of you. And yeah, we can hopefully connect with each other. Thank you.
A very quick question to ask, if I may get your attention for just 30 seconds, please. When all of you came in this morning, afternoon, evening, I don't know when you drove in here, on the way from the airport, your hotels, your residence, how many of you spotted purple balloons?
No one, because there was no purple balloons.
You got to speak for yourself, Ashish. This one, Anybody at all? Okay, question change. If I said you'd get 500 rupees, or say $5 or 5 AUD, CAD, any currency, for every purple balloon that you saw, do you think you'd make an effort to look for it? Yeah, obviously, I've not written up right now. I'm presuming I would. If somebody said I'm going to get $500 for every, but I would at least peep out of the window and look. And such is what happens with opportunities. So as much as this seems a little lame, you never know what the opportunity brings. So please speak to each other, network, make friends, make contacts. And Delia is looking at me and saying, this lady is crazy. But I just wanted to encourage it and say, you really never know when you exchange that card what it leads to. You really don't know.